So, Rhino, we good to go? I think we've got on the line now with us Admiral William Owens, former Vice Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. Good morning, Admiral. Thanks so much for joining us today, sir, on Middays.
Yeah, good morning, Gerard. Nice to be with you.
Yes, sir. So we've been discussing this morning and, of course, all throughout last week, the situation in Ukraine. The first thing that just seems to pop up is the fact that the Ukrainian people are putting up quite the resistance, and I think that is to the chagrin of the nut Vladimir Putin, who really didn't expect that. What's your perspective, sir?
Yeah, well, we really are, I suspect a lot of people are very surprised at this, but I think across the Ukraine, the resistance has been really wonderfully strong, and I think the power of the Russian military has been demonstrated to be not so great. We hear a lot of reports of Russian soldiers who are not exactly inspired to attack, and lots of issues with logistics, et cetera. So, it's been really heartening to see Zelensky, the prime minister's staying power, his leadership, and the resistance of the Ukrainian people. It's an inspiring time. I think if this is successful, we should have a New York ticker tape parade to celebrate him and the fight for democracy.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. I mean, it just seems like he's got, does President Zelensky, more intestinal fortitude, more grit, more tenacity than perhaps all the other world leaders combined when you look at what he's doing. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible to behold, and I agree with you. It just seems like that Vladimir Putin is determined no matter what. Do you think, sir, that there has been anything that this country has done with respect to foreign policy and what most would agree was a botched exit in Afghanistan? Do you think that influenced him in any way, or was this in the works and he was going to do it no matter what?
Well, I mean, I do think that the apparent inadequacy of the United States in some ways has caused Putin to become braver. There's a long history here, Gerard, and I don't think we have enough time to talk about it on your show, but, the end of the Cold War, I think that was a time when the United States missed many opportunities to set up new structures, unlike the way we were at the end of World War II. And there were a lot of things we really should have done, including dealing with the Ukraine, the Russians that are in the eastern part of the Ukraine, Crimea, et cetera. And I think that, the engagement with Europe has been less than what it should have been over these many years. So I think that in the aftermath of Afghanistan, we probably should have been really bolstering the Ukrainian forces and also making it clear that the United States was there to support the resistance in every way possible. And it's great to see that we are stepping up. I see that the president this morning announced something like $6.5 billion would be now spent, but it's too bad we have to wait until Zelensky shows his mettle, and the insurgency seems to be working to do that. So there's a long discussion here, I think, Gerard, but I think there's some things that we could have done better.
Yeah. So, of course, there's been a couple of packages of sanctions that have been imposed on Russia by this country and the EU as well. But we stopped short of, I guess, removing or stripping away Russia's primary source of revenue, and that's through the sale of oil, which is state-owned for the most part. We stopped short of that with respect to our sanctions of their central bank and in the SWIFT system as well. It just feels like, sir, that as long as Putin is able to get money, he's going to keep dumping that in his military ambitions. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think that, we do have a lot at stake with what goes on with the price of oil, and I don't know enough of the details of that to make a judgment on whether we should be shutting off his oil supplies. I was very proud of Germany for shutting off the Nord Stream pipeline, and the leadership of Germany has been stronger than I would have thought with regards to all of that, because they have so much at stake in that natural gas pipeline. I suspect there is great fear of what would happen to the price of oil and gas in the United States if we totally shut off Russia. And that's a real balancing act that needs to be taken by quality diplomats to really look at how we handle that. But this is something that Putin needs badly. I think we have to be aware that over the last 3 or 4 years, Putin has been retrenching in terms of becoming more and more reliant on Russia itself for what they need. And despite the fact that the ruble is collapsing and a variety of things are happening, he is relatively strong in the country, in his economy, strangely enough. And we just have to be strong here. And I think we do need to consider doing something with his oil revenues around the world, because without that, he is dog meat, I think. They're a small country, as you know, Gerard.
Admiral, we're up against we're up against a break right here. Can you hang through the break and join us on the other side?
I can.
Thank you, sir. Admiral William Owens is our guest here on Middays from the Element Wealth Studios. We'll take a break and be right back. We appreciate you joining us today. We've got Admiral William Owens on the line with us. He is the former vice chair of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, Admiral, one thing that caught my attention is the German chancellor now has indicated that they will step up their investment in terms of military spending to 2% of GDP. You know, for so long, sir, it just feels like the U.S., which spends about 4% of its GDP on military, and that's actually down. There were periods of time we spent much more than that, 7-8%, certainly during the Reagan era. It feels like this country, sir, has borne the brunt of the financing of defense of NATO in that respect. And now we've got Germany coming out and really taking a step that I think would be largely unpopular with the German public, were it not for what we're witnessing Putin in Ukraine.
Yeah, Gerard, I agree with you. I saw that as well, that he had noted that, and he is kind of a coalition president, by the way, which means that the feeling must be that the Germans stand behind this handsomely, that they would increase their defense spending by $100 billion. Now, I think that's over several years, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really glad to see that. And I was also really glad to see that they shut down this Nord Stream pipeline, this gas pipeline, which is huge, of course, for Germany and the supply of gas from Russia. It sounds like they shut it down permanently, not just temporarily. And so we have to be proud of the fact that they are finally stepping up. You're right, the United States has spent almost twice as much as a percentage of GNP on the military as the Germans have. And every president along the way has pushed the Germans to spend more, but they have not done so. And now it's good to see them stepping up. And I see that President Macron in France is also being very, very forward-leading in terms of his defense and spending more money on his defense. So out of all of this comes a little more balancing of the defense of Europe, and I think that's good. I think this is a lot better than us putting forces and money into Europe to support American troops. it's maybe the beginning of a new awareness. And so out of this thing that's going on in the Ukraine, I think will come many positives. It'll be the celebration of the support of democracy that we're seeing from President Zelensky. It'll come a strengthening of the military forces of Europe. And this little guy, Putin, who is a little man, in every way will be shown that democracy can stand strong. And I think that's really an important lesson for him and for all of us to celebrate the power that all of that brings if we can all be together.
Yeah, it seems like he really is being more ostracized by the day and turning him, and to some extent, by association, his country into a pariah on the entire world stage. I don't see how that's in the best interest of his country.
Yeah, isn't that true? Putin himself is one of the wealthiest men in the world, which he has made on the backs of the Russian people. And we can't forget that, separate from Vladimir Putin, who is not a good man, we need to look at what we can do to bring stability between the Russians and the Europeans after this is all over. There were a number of agreements at the end of the Cold War, and we have not stood up to all of those agreements. And so this is a good time for diplomacy, and I pray that we will have the wisdom to have strong and continuing diplomacy with the Russians and try to bring peace for the long term to Europe.
To your knowledge, sir, is there any leader in Russia that could be waiting in the wings, perhaps as a successor to Putin, to set him on a different path?
Wow. Well, as you know, there are 2 or 3 of those who have been poisoned and thrown in jail and have always shown a strong will to take a different pathway. And God knows what happens to Putin. But in the aftermath of this, surely the Russians themselves will be thinking differently about their leader. I see the resistance in the streets of the of Russia to what's going on in the Ukraine, which is heartening to see. And maybe that's a good sign that the people are standing up to him and that the future will be different. It's very complex, but I do think that there's hope in all of this, and this may actually turn out to be a catalyst for making things much better in the aftermath if we're really wise in the way we lead and the way the Europeans lead also.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
We'll say our prayers.
I got to wonder, sir, and you being, of course, at such a high level in the military, how does a Russia get these is being reported as very young members of their armed forces? How do they get them to prosecute this sort of campaign? How can you feel good about just invading a neighboring country, which is doing nothing? It's not really justified. There's no provocation. There's no threat to your homeland. How can they be persuaded, I guess, to engage in what is the brutality of war?
Well, I think that is a real challenge, and I think what we're seeing on the ground. I heard some on-the-ground reports yesterday, Gerard, from Russian soldiers saying we don't know who to shoot.
Wow. Meaning,
there's a lot of Russian people in the Ukraine who have a background in Russia.
Sure.
I think 30% of the population of the Ukraine is Russian. So if you're a young soldier on the streets of Kiev or Kharkov or any of the other cities, who do you shoot at? I mean, who is the enemy? And I think that's part of the weakness of the Russian military here. It's seeing these people in the Ukraine as somehow enemies. They're clearly not.
Yeah.
And, I suspect what we're seeing now is a resistance both from the Ukrainians as well as to some extent inside the Russian military about actually going into the Ukraine and doing this. And God knows, if you're an 18-year-old soldier on the streets, what is it that drives you? Is it love of Vladimir Putin? I don't think so. Is it defense of your country? No. So what is it? What would cause you to go in and shoot people who have always been very close to your country, the Ukrainians? So I think it's a real challenge for the leadership of the Russian military, and I pray that they will fail in this.
In your opinion, sir, do you think Putin has miscalculated the commitment to his personal efforts and those of his oligarchs?
Well, Gerard, in my opinion, a rational guy, and I was saying this before they went into the Ukraine, that he would not go in because a rational person would not do this.
Yeah, good point.
And so the fact that he is there, to me says, I double down on the point that he is clearly not rational. He could have seen this coming. He could have known what was going to happen. And his life is never going to be the same. And hopefully we'll find a way to have a diplomatic solution that will be good enough for the Russian people, but that this guy is no longer held in respect in his own country.
Yeah. Absolutely. A little bit of time left, sir. So the other thing that, of course, is of serious concern is his escalating his nuclear forces to be on higher alert. Got about a minute left. Certainly he's not crazy enough to push the buttons there, is he, sir?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I would hope that there's a number of cross-checks and reasons why that can't happen. It must be just more rhetoric. And I doubt seriously that we will see anything coming to light, any nuclear strikes. I can't believe that would happen.
Yes, sir. We pray that is the case. Admiral, it has been an honor and a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for joining us here on Middays, and thank you as well, sir, for your service to this great country. You take care, and we'll talk soon, I hope.
Thanks, Gerard. Pleasure.
Middays from the Element Wealth Studios. We'll be right back. Stay with us.